Danger Dolan. Why do we keep playing this game? What is it about WoW and MMORPGs in general that keep us hooked? It was during my research for this topic that I was actually stunned to find out just how many players aren't sure how to answer these questions. You'll find the usual theories like the quirky art style, the quality of the soundtrack, the cool looking ability icons, and learning how to play a class through the rotations, or maybe you find the game addicting because of the people you play it with. In the comment section of this video, I'll address the community's views on why they believe this game is addictive, but first I want to discuss the psychology behind WoW. It's not chance that bosses merely give the possibility to drop gear. It's not an accident that leveling up creates a gigantic bloom of light around your character. No mistakes were made when each level you gain makes it take longer to reach the next one. When you think about why do people get addicted to WoW, it has nothing to do with some new feature or expansion or the art style or the soundtrack or any of that nonsense. First, you have to define the concepts that draw players in, the things that make people buy the game initially, the type of inclusions you might tell your friend about. So a new expansion comes out and you say to him, you know how you always wanted to fly around Azeroth? Well, the new expansion lets you do that now. So that's all well and good. But then you need to define the gears that make the machine work, the machine being Warcraft. The reason people get addicted to WoW isn't some elusive myth only heard in dark alleyways. It's a well-documented philosophy taught to anyone in the industry of game development. If you haven't already, I highly recommend you check out the Total Biscuit's second ever video. It's called Addicted to Epics, which I will link below this video. He gives this an amazing explanation of WoW to people who don't play the game, and he talks about why it's so addictive. Luckily, it's been a while since I've seen this particular video, so I won't be parroting his opinions, and instead, I'm going to focus on, as I mentioned earlier, the psychology behind WoW. Now, questing uses a concept known as fixed ratio schedules as a simple reward system for content. You're tasked with killing 12 boars, right? And once you kill precisely 12, you receive a reward. You don't get rewarded for killing 11, and 13 grants you no bonus, thereby making 12 the set reward number, hence fixed ratio. If your task were complete after killing the first boar, you'd have no goals left to accomplish. But instead you get side accomplishments in the form of experience points and scraps to sell for gold, while you endeavor to kill 11 more for the big reward. This is the most basic of game design philosophies. The player undertakes a task, along the way accomplishing side goals to keep them from getting bored, then is rewarded after reaching a set objective. Most games do this, but unlike an RPG like Final Fantasy, WoW gives thousands of bite-sized tasks in contrast to one long quest with side missions. Of course, questing is only one part of the game, but it best illustrates the fixed effort to reward system you'll find in almost all aspects of this game. Now, variable ratio schedules you will already know about, well, assuming you've ever played a slot machine. Whereas quests reward you after you perform a task 12 times, a variable ratio is pure random chance. You could be rewarded after one boar kill, you could be rewarded after 20,000. See, this is where gear drops come in. Have you ever gotten obsessed with killing a boss every day, every week, just for the minute chance it'll drop that thing you want? Rivendair's Death Charger springs to mind and is the prime culprit of variable ratio. From vanilla to early Wrath, this mount had a 1 in 5,000 chance to drop from Lord Arius Rivendair. You would have to kill specific bosses in Stratholme to fight him. Then once it didn't drop, like a rat in a cage pressing levers for a pellet that wouldn't arrive, you would try again. B.F. Skinner invented the Skinner box, which is a cage for a rat and a lever, in which the lever drops a pellet after like 30 times when you press it. The rat soon learns that by pressing it 30 times or so, he gets a treat, and he'll be fine performing a dull, monotonous task if he's guaranteed a reward at the end. Now, if a game doesn't care about subscription fees or microtransactions, they won't use the Skinner box philosophy because they have your money and thus don't care if you want to play the game endlessly. But an MMO like WoW needs you to stay. It needs you to log in every day to pump the lever for pellets, even when you're not interested anymore. It's for this reason that the game was designed to entice you to play just that little bit longer. Only one more quest, only one more level, one more kill for the gear drop chance. You get a variable ratio reward once a day for completing a scenario or dungeon. It's a reason to log in for potential loot. Now there's a part of your brain known as the limbic system, and it's responsible for the effort and reward response. When you complete an activity with success, neurons communicating through neurotransmitters release dopamine into your brain circuits, resulting in euphoria. The more effort, the bigger reward, and the more dopamine you receive in turn. But it's not just about the feeling of the pleasure of success. The limbic system also catalogs the event and remembers to repeat it for the same rewarding experience. If you've ever sunk a few dollars into a slot machine and won with profit, you'll know how scary and exhilarating it is when a part of your brain floods you with dopamine. You feel amazing, like you've accomplished some huge feat, and a little voice in your head says to play again. In the gambling industry, they call this the fever. WoW is essentially a more elaborate, successful, and adaptive slot machine that takes into account skill rather than just pure luck. It is, however, very important to bear in mind that slot machines have been around for the last 100 years, whereas MMORPGs have only seen action in the last 10. Like an infant or teenager finding its place in the world, the two only share similarities in concept, not execution. It's like comparing a magnifying glass to a telescope in that they share a similar fundamental purpose, but the differences are staggering. I'd also like to talk about contingencies, with the first being chain schedules. Sometimes a reward doesn't have to be gear or experience points. Funnily enough, sometimes unlocking a new obstacle can be the reward in itself. Think about the Guardians of Mogushan, the very first LFR, and the satisfaction you feel when you unlock the next LFR by beating it. You're only making more challenges for yourself, but you still get a hit of dopamine, and that's because you're advancing in the game. Chain schedules is seen in pretty much every video game ever, because more often than not, completing a task and receiving another list is just as pleasurable as receiving a reward in itself. What you're doing is treating that progression as a fixed ratio reward. It's actually quite curious when you think about it. The second contingency is known as extinction. When something in the game stops working, or maybe it's nerfed or removed, you get angry. There was an experiment a while back about a pigeon roaming freely and another pigeon chained up. The free pigeon got a treat every 30 seconds while the chained pigeon starved. After a while, the free pigeon stopped getting treats, so for no reason the bird started beating up the chained pigeon. It's irrational frustration from someone looking for a scapegoat. Think about how many times a class has been nerfed, seemingly for unfair reasons, and the community lashes out at the developers. Bring back our ability, you guys suck, Ghostcrawler should be fired, rah rah rah. So final contingency, and this one's my favorite, you have behavioral contrast. It's when something exceeds your expectations and the following events don't meet the same quality. So a chimpanzee is pulling levers and receiving lettuce, which they love to eat. But one time they pull the lever and a grape drops out. The chimpanzee is celebrating, waving his arms, happy as can be. Then he pulls the lever again and lettuce falls out. So he starts raging and beating up the wall, totally out of his mind, even though he got the same thing he's always gotten. He has no expectations, and when they're not met, he goes apeshit. This was clear during BC when people were fine with difficult heroics. Then Wrath introduced easier heroics, and the player base were okay, and then Cataclysm returned to the BC paradigm and people lost their shit. Anytime a feature in the game, say an expansion is released, anytime it's released and it doesn't meet the expectations people have based on the former precedents, the forums fill with walls of rage text. See, these contingencies are side effects, symptoms of an addictive system. Why is WoW addictive? Because that's exactly what it was designed to be. The art style, music, character customization, and new features draw you in initially, and the ratios keep you hooked even when you don't know why you're playing. Raiding requires time commitments for variable ratio rewards, using skill, tactics, and progression as a way to keep you alert, each new boss changing the slot machine icons, making it more complex, yet easier with gear drops so you never feel like you're hitting a wall. You're walking on a progression treadmill chasing gear drops, even though the treadmill isn't taking you anywhere, no matter how hard you run. But if we are aware of what the game is doing to be so addictive, why do we keep playing it? I mean, we're not mindless animals, we can think for ourselves. Well, just ask anyone who doesn't enjoy the game why they still play and you'll get the same answer. Because we have nothing else to do. I played this game during Wrath all day, every day for a full year after I finished school. From someone else's perspective, I looked addicted, but the truth was I just didn't have anything else to do. I didn't make it into the course I wanted, couldn't find any work, couldn't stand watching TV. All WoW does is fill a void, one that's already there. It's just that, unlike real life, WoW rewards you almost every time. Doing achievements gives you a bigger number. Leveling up restores your health, increases your character's level, and shoots gold light all over the place. Killing a boss drops gear, whereas you might apply for work, put in the effort, maybe even get an interview, and then receive nothing at all. The key to addiction here is not about what it makes you do, but what it makes you fail to do. If you don't go to a job interview because you're raiding that night, it means your WoW priorities have overtaken your real life ones, which is not good. Playing a lot doesn't mean you're addicted, because if you make the time to spend with your family or friends, all you're doing is playing video games in your spare time, of which you probably have an abundance. And even with all these examples of subconscious limbic system exploitation I've listed which WoW is guilty of, why should that make the game any less fun? I'd actually prefer if a lot more games would do this, to employ behavioral momentum and keep me excited for new quests, new content, new expansions. WoW has actually done more good than harm, since here I am 8 years later making money just talking about the game. Raid leaders learn skills about managing and talking to people, organizing schedules, recruiting, explaining tactics. Skills important, actually important to real life business situations. Shy people usually lost in single player games gradually work up the nerve to socialize with others, some even forming relationships outside the game. So here's a better question than whether or not WoW is addictive. Why should WoW's addictiveness be a bad thing? If you're going to neglect people or waste what little money you have on subscriptions and microtransactions, you're just gonna do that anyway with other forms of media. MMOs are just a scapegoat for crappy behavior. Now let's go to the community comments, starting with Superfry. I think WoW is addictive because it has a psychological reward system built in. You get a kick out of getting just one more of insert whatever you like here, and you want more and more rewards. Blizzard gates this content in many ways, so you have to keep playing over time to get more, and that keeps you subscribed and happy. So I'd like to touch on the subject of gating for a moment. As most of you will know, during Cataclysm, they made it easy to gear for raids through the Tabid Reputation dungeon grind, whereas Mr. Pandaria limits you to purple gear with a Valor cap and a once a day rep bonus. This means those already in raiding guilds can get carried for gear, and the people without guilds are week by week forced into LFR for rep and to Valor cap for gear purchases. This means you are no longer playing at the pace you want, but the pace the game thinks you should. For the hardcore players trying to get into normal mode raiding, this irritates them to no end, since finding a guild in crappy gear, especially as a tank, would be a long process spread over months. And I should know, because that's exactly what I've just gone through. Leveling though, you can grind from 1 to 90 in a matter of weeks. This weekly cap was implemented for a number of reasons. First, it's to stop people burning themselves out at endgame, so that instead of getting some nice gear, joining a raid team and logging off until each raid, you now have reasons to run dungeons, scenarios, dailies, and other content in your free time. Second, it's to help keep all the player base's gear levels at a reasonable average level. So in Kata, you might find people who have been level capped for a couple of weeks walking around in a full set of normal mode eye level gear, which is unreasonable. But now the raiders and the players capping Valor every week will be about the same eye level, making it possible for the casual players to find raid guilds, unlike in real life when having a resume that's not filled with experience, references and certificates will get you laughed out of the building. So even though I don't like the Valor cap very much, and I'm sure a good deal of players will feel the same way, it is hard to ignore the fact that it makes me log on every week, and that by doing it for a couple of months, I now have the gear needed for normal modes without doing a single raid. Well, LFR doesn't count. And a good slot machine would be the one that increased your odds of winning so long as you came back at least a couple of times a week. If you look around and everyone is winning, everyone is covered in 522 purple gear, that's no fun. But looking around and seeing a lot of people with blue gear, knowing you're doing better because you actually came back at the right moment and did the right thing, that is satisfying. It would be even better if there was a way to exceed the Valor cap, as in your cap, and then a scenario that awarded you 120 Valor now only gives like 5, so that you can feel free to grind if that's what you really want, but it will take you considerably longer than if you just wait a week for the reset with everyone else. I feel that's a fair compromise because right now I log off when I'm valor capped since there is absolutely nothing else to do for that week. As far as I can tell, that would only benefit the game. In fact, I'm gonna email Ghostcrawler right now. So got another comment here from Sampo Studios. Don't know if it's addiction, but why people spend so much time on playing WoW is because you have to do a lot of off content to do what you want. For example, if you want to play good arena games, you have to get max level and get gear. If you like raiding, you have to do gold farming for repairs, flasks, buff food, gems, enchants, and still need good dungeon gear. People don't get bored so fast when they can't even do the stuff they want right away, part of a good subscription model. So just like the fixed ratio schedule of questing, endgame needs the similar model of subjectives, things to do on your way towards the main objective. How boring would the game be if you zoned into a raid and Lord Walker Cho had prepared a feast, gave you gold for repairs, then gemmed and enchanted any gear that's not up to par? Why do anything but sit in the instance for your guild's next raid? And for some people, those subjectives might become their goal, like, I want to get all the achievements. There's no reward at the end, just a number and some shiny golden plaques. But what if that's all you need? Blizzard realized at the end of Cataclysm that people were getting bored because raiding and PvP was the only endgame. So they started gating content and gave optional things like pet battles and challenge mode dungeons with real rewards, stronger pets and transmog sets, as well as the lucky charms that give the potential for more loot, but it's not mandatory. So it's like if you're driving down a long highway, your friend's house is hundreds of miles away on that road. You see signposts along the way, advertisements, a diner, a petrol station. You think, hey, I need petrol, so you head there and fill up. You're hungry, so you head up the diner as well. It's not random chance the owners of these establishments built them out of random chance in those exact spots. They did their research, worked out what people need, then catered to that need and profited while doing so. Since NPCs aren't people, all Blizzard can do is emulate that same system, because the goal is to draw out your experience, because the more time you spend playing equates to the lesser chance you'll unsubscribe. Patches are implemented with a small amount of new features like a single raid or some scenarios because they're padding out the expansion. And now there's a comment from Andrew Nixon. WoW is so addictive because it is specifically designed to hook people in for long periods of time. Massive amounts of content with different ways to play the game appeal to many types of game players. You get what you put into the game and create your own experience. Want to tackle hard content? Go ahead. Want to run one dungeon a night and level over the course of 6 months? Go right ahead. Much like the casinos in Las Vegas, WoW is designed to manipulate to my brain. I'm gonna leave that into the recording, fuck it. It's designed to manipulate our brains into playing more and more. So I agree that variety is an important part of MMOs, and the broad appeal is a huge reason for WoW's success. How often do you hear from the super successful games and movies those words, there's something in it for everyone? You have the scientific players, those who get the most satisfaction trying new things in games. There are the politician types that adapt to other players while climbing the social ladder, as it were, typically raid leaders. Then you got the socialites who use MMOs to talk to people because that's what they like doing. Habitualists who like routine and doing the same thing over and over. Strategists like raiders, competitors in PvP. Collectivists who love the achievements and mounts and hard to get knickknacks. And finally the soloists, who will always reject your attempt to form a group and are content to just log on for quests and dailies. If an MMO doesn't cater to all these players, especially if it has a subscription model of any type, then it barely deserves to exist. But as Andrew wrote here, you get what you put into the game and create your own experience. Any sandbox game has the tools in place to let any player do anything they want. But WoW also caters to players looking for structure, reasons to do things. A game like Minecraft is specifically built to let you create anything you want, play the game as you see fit, like shaping primordial soup. Whereas WoW is a pre-built theme park that lets you choose what ride to go on. Minecraft is solely reliant on your own creativity, but WoW entices you to play the new rides, to retry the old ones. I wouldn't say variety is a key ingredient of addiction though. but broad appeal leads to more subscribers, more rats in the machine pulling levers. Now a comment from Septree. The game is not addictive to me at all. It is all the memories I have of it that are. I want to re-experience all of those again. Think back to your first raid with your friends, how you were laughing and joking around, then things get serious when it's time to kill the boss. Then after the boss is dead, you scramble to find the loot you want. You see that piece you've been wanting forever, but so is your friend. You both roll and you get it. He rages, but we all laugh. That was WoW to me. So there's something to be said for nostalgia. I feel that Septree might be implying that the sense of camaraderie and accomplishment from killing bosses is gone, which isn't so, but it's easy to forget it still exists when you're not in a raid guild. But in its own way, it's that attempt to capture past glory that leads to a certain type of addiction. Like the monkey getting a grape instead of lettuce, you'll be unsatisfied until you attain the same reward for pushing a button that you once did. It's because you have certain expectations, and when they're not met or exceeded, you won't feel satisfied. So you push the button harder and faster because you want that glorious thing, which in this case resembles social contentment. You reject the memories of the bad times, like that day a few members bickered over a loot drop causing stressful guild drama, or the month when not enough people showed up to a raid and people started leaving left, right and center, and you instead focus on the good times like Septree mentioned. So my good raid memories started in Karazhan, obviously, and I look back on those days with fondness. Unhappy that the recent additions like Elephant, the scaled raid group sizes 10 and 25 man have tarnished this memory somewhat. But then it's only when I think about it in depth and that I realize a lot of those Kara days sucked. You had to go through a long attunement chain which made recruiting new members a huge pain. Nobody took me seriously because I was that crappy hunter pulling random trash because I was bored, wearing gear that had frost resistance simply because it was blue and someone told me to get blue gear. Finding members for 25 man took forever since we were a dodgy 10 man guild. By the time we found enough members, half the expansion was over. But it was my first introduction to raiding and I loved it. So can memories be addictive? Can anything really live up to the first time you experience something? Oftentimes it's better to let some things go, or at the very least dampen your expectations for the future, otherwise you may fall into the typical unhealthy feeling known as obsession, which is a close brother of addiction. Now a comment from Brumps Gaming. The whole reason I think I'm so addicted is because it's nothing like my real life. In the game I'm Brumps the Tranquil Master, but in real life I'm just Sean the guy who doesn't get out much. I feel a huge sense of accomplishment when I clear a raid or boss I've been struggling on, not a sense that I get in real life but I thrive. You don't appear to get this from many other things, i.e. passing a test. That's not much. I feel like I'm not me in the game, like I'm an awesome guy, not a boring person. So this is a comment I feel a lot of people can relate to. I know for a fact that I can. And I'd like to thank Brumps for bringing it up. As I mentioned before, addiction usually evolves due to a void in one's life. You might not have a lot of friends in real life to hang out with, or you might be shit at sports, or maybe you can't find a job, or there are problems in your family life, a whole number of reasons, and it's because of this that you like to escape now and then. Maybe through books or music, daydreaming, movies, or video games. Think about fantasy games for a moment. Think about how many put you in the role of some super powerful hero on some epic quest to slay something or save someone. Whereas in real life, you're just some schmo on welfare leeching off your parents, trying to figure out what the meaning of your own existence is. People like to use WoW as the scapegoat for their problems, which when in reality, you can get addicted to almost anything simply because you don't know how else to fill that time. It's just that WoW is better at luring you into that time sink than other forms of entertainment. The main reason for that being how immersive it is. All the zones, different race choices, backstories, raid and dungeon encounters, future expansion possibilities. There's no one set story. You're plonked in a deep world and given multiple directions to follow. So here's a personal story to give my point about escapism some flavor. Back when Wrath of the Lich King released, I just finished high school, which had been a massive waste of time. And I don't just say that idly, it was a massive waste of time for me. My exam scores were abysmally low because I couldn't give a shit. I lost contact with a few friends I had, and to summarize, things weren't going well for me in that period. So I decided to take a year off, forget about education and work and everything, and instead play WoW full time, which is what I'd always wanted to do, but school always got in the way. So I did. 7 days a week, morning till night, there I was every waking moment, grinding to level 80, dungeons, gearing up and raiding. By the end of the year, I obviously needed a break from WoW, which is what I did until Cataclysm came out. But the point is, there was a huge chasm in my life devoid of education, job prospects, or social interaction that needed to be filled. From any third-party perspective, it looked like I was addicted, but the fact was, I had nothing else to do. I applied for jobs, sure, but I'd never hear back. Full university-type courses only accepted applications once a year. Though luckily I managed to get into a writing course following my year of WoW, otherwise I don't know what I would have done. And the only real friends I had were the ones I made while raiding or PvP. Some of them I met in real life and are friends with to this day. So if I didn't play WoW, I'd have just filled the void with something else like movies or another game, and in which case I wouldn't have made all the friends or had all the fun that I did. I would have just wasted it on some other shit. It's because inside WoW you don't have to deal with the crumminess of real life. You don't have to deal with physical illness, emotional issues, or abuse. In real life, if you don't have job experience, you're financially boned. But in WoW, if you don't have the gear for a raid guild, all you have to do is grind some Valor points, buy some, and you're set. The game is fair. Real life is a roulette wheel of random bullshit with no expansions or content patches.
In the outside world, I am a simple geologist. But in here, I am Falcorn, defender of the Alliance. I've braved the Fargo Deep Mine, defeated the Bloodfish at Jared's Landing.
And now the final comment from Am I Cool Yet? I think people keep coming back because of how we've invested in it already. No one wants to start from scratch in a completely new area, knowing nothing about their surroundings, when they have some top level, top gear character in another game. Sure, a lot of people like playing new games, it's refreshing to do so, but after a while, when the new game gets that kind of grind feeling, you'll probably just say, fuck this, I'm going back to my level 90 in WoW. And that is the difference which separates RPGs from other game genres. The whole foundation of the role-playing game is that you take on the role of a character, typically in a fantasy setting. You progress through quests in an immersive, time-consuming world. When WoW popularized the genre of MMORPG and other companies saw how well it was doing, everyone jumped on the same bandwagon attempting to replicate that success without understanding the form properly. You'll know these already as WoW clones, like monkeys throwing their own shit at a canvas attempting to replicate the Mona Lisa. It always ends up a costly and generic mess that have more in common with feces than any other form of entertainment. It's that time investment, it's the familiarity and not just in the gameplay mechanics. I'd like to draw attention to WoW's version of fantasy for a moment. Right from the offset, you have recognizable archetypes like the troll or the orc or the dwarf or the elf. Each have their own history, simple yet deep. By which I mean, orcs are angry otherworldly creatures like the Warcraft equivalent of Klingons, but orcs like Thrall are shamanistic and peaceful, whereas humans like Arthas, a prince, can become the king of the undead. It thwarts expectations, but remains true to what you'd expect of that particular race, hence, simple but deep. Now look at the races in Final Fantasy XIV, a competing MMO. You have Hyur, Elezen, Lalafell, Roegadyn, and Mikote. Each come from places like Alamigo, Oasia, Ul'dah. Here's a descriptive passage I found in Wikipedia, listen to this. Ul'dah is a sultanate with a predilection for commerce situated in the Thanalan Desert. The thalassocracy of Limsa Lominsa finds its home on the island of Vilbrand, and Ishgard is a theocracy built into the snowy mountains of Coerthas. Does any of this sound interesting to you? If you were describing WoW to a stranger, you'd say, my character is a troll from the Echo Isles. With Final Fantasy XIV, I'm a Roegadyn from Coerthas fighting for my theocracy because it's threatened by Imperial Legatist Nail Vandanis. Would you rather sink all your free time into the troll, or some random dude with an indecipherable backstory? It's because WoW draws on already existing archetypes, whereas poorly thought out MMOs make up crap as they go. It's alright if it's been previously established in other mediums like the Troopers and Jedi from the Old Republic, but then your experience needs to surpass that offered by WoW. This isn't 1997, you can't expect people to jump ship because of a new brand anymore. People on the internet, believe it or not, demand quality, depth, and immersion for their time invested. The game also has to offer something WoW doesn't, which in this case represents the ability not to be a WoW clone. And that is it for this week, guys. We've talked about everything that needs to be talked about and discussed and etc. and etc. Now, as a topic for the next video, we should be done in about a week, it will be the WoW movie, directed by Duncan Jones, the son of David Bowie. What do you think is going to happen with that movie? I want to hear your thoughts, your speculations, your fucking... I don't even have words. It's so exciting. So let me know what you're thinking about it. Is it going to be CG? Is it going to be real people? What's going to happen? It's exciting stuff. So that's it. Have a good one.